There is no doubt social media has significantly changed the media landscape. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp have become an integral part in the generation and distribution of the news. With these platforms comes the challenge of what has become known as fake news. Gatekeeping is almost impossible on these platforms. Individual users have complete control of what they share and post the world over. The conversation on fake news has become more important whenever there are elections. And on the 30th of July, Zimbabweans are heading to the polls to choose leaders from local authorities right up to the president. This is a huge task that makes dissemination of information critical. Inevitably, the accuracy of the news media and what people have access to on their mobile devices takes center stage.
Political parties in Zimbabwe are rounding up their election campaigns in preparation for the elections to be held on Monday, the 30th of July. Social media has been key throughout this election, but it has been overwhelmed by the disinformation against all the major parties and significant candidates. Twitter, Facebook and WhatsApp has been used as tools for mass disinformation.
Okay, so this has been an interesting run-up to the election, and social media has taken really center stage in terms of the issues that even the political players get to talk about. We can say to a certain extent, social media really sets the agenda. And who is social media? It's not only the political players, but it's also the people, you know, just about anyone. People talk about issues, and these issues are picked up by politicians. That's what has been exciting. And well, we have to also acknowledge that social media has limitations. There are some issues that social media tends not to pick because politics is very localized, and there are some local issues that could be, you know, very particular to a certain place that people of a certain locality may be discussing that are not picked on social media. So there are some limitations there, but to really a larger extent, social media has been quite significant, and we have seen that some of these national leaders, the president, the leader of the opposition, they've been responding to some concerns that are raised on social media. In that regard, social media has been very significant.
Okay, social media is shaping opinions this election by way of having ordinary people setting the agenda of what's being discussed. They get to show you what they want to hear or talk about by retweeting, by posting on their Facebook pages, by posting pictures and videos, and then people then going to like and comment on those videos. What I find is, like, unlike past elections, the traditional media doesn't have a hold on what they want the community to talk about, but it's the communities that are telling them what they want to talk about, even questioning some of the things they are covering them. I read a tweet where someone was actually saying they were disappointed by the level of journalism in Zimbabwe because these journalists are not asking, for example, where are these people who are said to have been repeatedly recorded on the voters' roll staying? No one has gone to those addresses where there are 5 people with 5 different names or whatever on one address to find out if they really exist, if that address actually exists. So you have a critical mass that is critically thinking and asking critical questions and putting them in the public domain to also get everyone else. So it's a chain reaction. When one person asks, everyone gets to then say, oh, okay. And that gets us sort of engaged in the conversation, unlike in the past where traditional media would publish stories in newspapers, which we know a majority of people wouldn't get to hear. But now with WhatsApp, everyone or a majority of people get to hear and participate in the conversations. So I think for me that is important because candidates in the current elections get to think first before they act because they know that ordinary people are going to say something about it.
Let's talk about Fatai Mahere in Mount Pleasant, Harare. Her campaign has been social media driven. Not only that, even grassroots. She's also gone down to the people. So it has been, she's been mixing the two, making sure that they complement each other. I think most of the political players, that is exactly what they are doing. So in that regard, political players are very mindful of what for what conversations are there on social media and how they tend to drive those conversations and how they tend to try in some way influence how the discourse is shaped on social media. And the other thing, you may recall that at some point, I think it was Nelson Chamisa, right? He said something very problematic at his rally in the UK. And I was following that on Facebook. The moment he said it, I picked that he said something that's quite problematic, and people are not going to be easy on him. And within a minute, people were already talking about that, and he was forced to apologize. So it can tell you that social media in some way gives people the power to reach the political players and to prod them to respond to issues. So it has been a very significant and important factor.
There's been an increase in the uptake of new media. There's been an increase in the number of young people on Twitter and on Facebook. And most of them are experiencing an election for the first time. So the free flow of information among these mediums has increased, and that's a positive trend. But what we have heard is they need to combine these with the traditional elements of outreach. You need community radio, you need public meetings, you need your newspapers. So all those tools combined together can actually be effective in enhancing citizen participation and actually the access to information for the public.
How are people accessing information that's been churned out by these political parties? How are they accessing their social media? How do they converse or talk to their candidates?
I believe this year, a lot of the candidates, especially the presidential candidates. Tim Nangako has got a Twitter account. I follow him as well. Nelson Chamisa has got a Twitter account. You can DM them. They interact with the people. They even give them updates of what they're becoming for certain rallies. So I think this year, especially 2018, there is the candidates, they're more open to social media compared to the previous years. Yeah.
Okay, she mentioned only 2 candidates. I believe there are more than 2 candidates. So I wouldn't say they are using social media to campaign very well. So I only know 2 parties, that's ZANU-PF and MTC. And then the other MTC, of which I don't hear much about it, so I doubt they campaign that much.
I'm quite happy that most of them have actually embraced the use of digital platforms to share their information with the constituents. And then in that case, some of them have got WhatsApp platforms, some of them have got Twitter handles, some of them have got Facebook pages. So in that case, it allows us to have a platform to actually converse with them, to engage in dialogues with them. There are also other organizations that also engage these political aspirants on dialogues and stuff like that. So through such, we have managed to see that at least that gives us an opportunity to relay our questions to them, to question their manifestos, and to tell them what we expect from them in the respective constituencies that they represent. So I could safely say that they're actually doing well in embracing the digital era.
The conversation on fake news has become more important whenever there are elections. This is a huge task that makes dissemination of information critical. Inevitably, the accuracy of the news media and what people have access to on their mobile devices takes center stage.
I think fake news is big in Zimbabwe. It actually has fertile ground. Why? Because the media is curtailed. There's very few media houses to talk about that are independent. Instead of the government giving us licensing community radios, they are giving government-owned media entities media licenses to practice in smaller towns. And that means that the people are not getting the kind of information that they want. They don't hear themselves in these stories that are published or broadcast in the media. So what do? They end up broadcasting stuff that is not verified because they are not trained to do it. They do not know the ethics of journalism. So unless government opens up the space, gives communities a license to work such that they are professionally trained and allowed to work under conditions that are controlled, or that can be, for example, the VMCZ can then tell them that this is how you're supposed to publish a story, this is how to avoid label or defamation of character and things like that. And this would force communities that are broadcasting to work within those confines. But when you don't have licenses to work, people are then using whatever platforms that they find, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, to just post anything because they know, well, I'm not working professionally, I might as well post what I want for fun. But if there are platforms where they would share information professionally or even in a formalized way, then it would be easier to control fake news. So we have a long way to go. Those that are doing it or have been doing it for a while, it will take time to rehabilitate and get them to fall in line and to do the proper processes of news production.
There's a lot of fake news that is circulating, you know, especially in terms of rallies. You can, there can be a misconception on the number of people that would have been said to attend rallies. So actually we are, I could say we are fortunate enough to have many different media organizations having websites. So if you feel like there's something wrong, maybe there's someone who is, there is a certain media organization that is aligned to a certain party, you can always compare what they write with what other media houses write. And also with taking into consideration that almost everyone has now has access to social media, you can choose people to follow. Most people now attend such platforms. They are no longer afraid. So through that, you can be able to come across certain people that would have actually attended. And in that case, you can actually find out what would have actually transpired. So at least in that way, you can be able to do away with fake news.
There's been so much in terms of efforts to make sure that people are aware of fake news, of which someone who is in the academia or who is a journalist, it's very easy for them to pick out that this is really not it, right? You know, at the first instance, when we are reading something, I mean, there is a red flag that goes when something is off about a story, right? That's very easy. We can call it a hunch or journalistic gut. But let's talk about someone who's not really that media literate, so to speak. I think there is a need for media literacy to be an issue that people talk about, because there are some people who take things at face value, things as they are. It is important for those who are into media advocacy to also dwell on media, you know, literacy, not to concentrate mainly on journalists, try to capacitate journalists. Yes, you can do that. In fact, most of these journalists don't need much of training when it comes to fake news, because they can pick it. They are used to writing stories. It's very easy for them to see that this is fake news. But for someone who reads, remember that social media is so devolved that anyone can write anything and pose it as news. But for someone who's not really into this field, it may be that hard for them to pick that this is fake news. So it is important that when we're talking media literacy, we are trying to find out how we can make sure that the general public is aware of these issues.
Independent, reliable media is something that's crucial for all countries that are looking for democracy. You have to have a media out there to explain to the people what really is going on or what is not going on. This is a very important aspect of democracy. In our country, we refer to it as the fourth estate, meaning that it's crucial for our democracy that we have reliable news, and that's the role and the responsibility of journalists in all senses, both the print journalists as well as nowadays social media, etc.
But the nice thing about social media is that it doesn't need to be as serious as a newspaper, because a newspaper, they have to think about their customers who will be advertising, you know, so they have to think a lot. But with social media, you get to laugh at times. You laugh at the funny things and the stupid things that politicians say and do. And instead of that being noise, sometimes it becomes a place to go to find relief. A hard day's work, doing hard things, difficult things, getting you mentally tired, will take your mind off the pressure by making you catch up on politics, but in a humorous way. So we have a population that is getting to know what's happening in their governance space, but in a humorous way, in a light way, which is very important.
Well, it's very interesting in America because after the last election in the United States, a lot of things that came out, which always does in a campaign, candidates will say almost anything and not necessarily check. But again, today with technology, it's very, very easy to determine whether that is factual or it is not factual. And every day in certain newspapers in the United States, including, I believe, the New York Times, they will say, okay, this is what came out of Washington today. This was what was accurate, and this is what was not accurate. And it's very important for people to have a view of both issues when they're talking about something in particular. Something is real, something is not real. And that, again, is another role of media, and particularly social media today, because it's very easy to check if a politician says something like X and it actually is Y, so the media pick up on that very carefully.
If someone posts a fake letter from the government declaring that the elections have been moved or postponed, I'll first look for a stamp, a government stamp, a government letterhead. I'll look for who is the person who signed off on this letter, what's the wording of the letter. All those can tell you if it's real or not. And before I share that picture, I'll definitely look for those signs. But still, because maybe I won't get verification there and then, I will say if this letter is true, or if this letter is really from government, this is what I think about it. So for me, that if leaves room to say, I haven't verified this, I'm not sure if it's true, but if it is, this is what I think. If not, you are allowed to think otherwise. But another thing that I have done also is to say, this is a letter allegedly from the Ministry of so-and-so, and this is what I think. So in other words, I'm sharing this with you. It's supposedly from the government after doing my own fact-checking, but it might not be foolproof. So you may as well also do your own. So it's quite difficult, but what we get away with is that we're not professional media houses, we're individuals. So somehow, I guess the society gives us a little room to make mistakes.
During the run-up to this election, there have been Twitter bullies that have popped up all over the place, such as the Varakashi, the Nerorist, and the social media junta, whose main aim and role is to wash down people's comments and to attack those who they perceive are against their political thinking agenda and minds.
We have seen the rise of these accounts that seem to be supporting, their candidates. Let me talk about Emmerson Mnangagwa and Nelson Chamisa. So we have seen that there's been a surge in these accounts that are uncompromising. Whenever you criticize, I mean respectfully, and a candidate, what they do is that they just rain on you and they criticize, dismiss you. The result is that there is no meaningful conversation about whatever issue that you would have raised, and you can't really certainly say it's only one party. We've seen it with Emmerson Mnangagwa. There are so many accounts with 1 or 2 followers, some of them. And there are also these Chamisa Chete kind of accounts that also make sure that they dump down the conversation. It doesn't go anywhere. Some people, I think, are frustrated by that. Whenever they are trying to address certain issues that they think are important, that people should discuss, as in this run-up to elections, those accounts will come down on you, and you are discouraged in that way. But I mean, this is not to fully dismiss the importance of having conversations on social media. We've had so many conversations that have gone through social media that have been discussed by political players and ordinary people. So, I mean, it widens the base for discussions. Social media is very important because it accommodates people who otherwise in mainstream media do not have voices.
The Twitter brigade that lashes out at people, that one has always been there. It's just that it's never been as organized. So what we find now is that you have one person, for example, who has a certain agenda or wants to get into office, gathering up a group of people with the same agenda to support him, then unleashing them on Twitter, people who will maybe disagree with him. In the past, we have isolated people going against isolated Twitter users and critiquing their posts. And that was mainly not so difficult because all you do is block that individual. But now with these groups, it's very difficult to block a mass of them. However, I find that critical thinking masses are also banding together and supporting each other against these people, such that it's now a job for them to also be attacking people. They also know that they'll be attacked back by these people that are also creating a mass to fight anything that tries to go against them in the negative way.
There is freedom of expression, and you are never limited to air your views on social media platforms. You know, what you say goes, and you don't have to limit yourself or to limit your opinions just because you're afraid of what someone else is going to say, because you cannot feel like you are trapped into being aligned to certain political beliefs or to following what other people say just because you're scared. But at the end of the day, it's all about what you want and what you believe in. I believe that is what democracy is all about. So you just have to air your views, you put out your grievances out there, you let the political aspirants know what you want. Because the moment you keep quiet, that's when you get shortchanged in service delivery, you get shortchanged in development, and then at the end of the day, we'll always be crying over lack of development in our country. Economical problems that you're always facing. But the more that you're brave, and then the more that you feel like, I can actually do this, I can actually air my views, as long as it doesn't affect the next person, and as long as it is the truth about how you feel, I think you don't have really to mind what other people would attack you and say on social media.
There is a school of thought that the people on social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp, do not amount to the number of people who are registered to vote. With that in mind, can we use social media to predict how people are going to vote merely by following conversations online?
Well, it's very interesting with the developments that have been happening lately. But I think I could safely say, yeah, you can actually tell from the posts that are there. You can actually like have more or less of a balance of who has got a better following than who. But then at the end of the day, I think we just have to wait till after the elections to safely say this is what happens. But I think analytically, you can just look at the way that people are responding to certain political parties on social media. And then maybe you may just have a brief understanding of what the outcome may look like.
You cannot use social media to predict elections. I think we've seen it in the USA. They failed to do that. We cannot do, more so us, where, I mean, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps 40, 50% of the population is not even on social media or doesn't have reach. It's difficult, it's impossible. But again, that's not to dismiss social media entirely. It has a role to play. But to say you can predict an election result through the conversations that you see on social media, I think it would be quite problematic. And not only problematic, but also misleading.
I don't think social media is a good place to predict how people are going to vote, because social media is global. You get people in the diaspora, millions of them, who have more access to these social media accounts than we do. So if you're going to, for example, get 3 million people voting, saying, oh, we're going to vote for, who's running for office? One of the 23. And you tell yourself this is a good sign, then it's a bad way to judge, because probably more than 50% of the people voting are in the diaspora, and they're just telling you how they feel or how they would vote if they were here. And the people in the rural areas, you don't have access to data, probably no access to smartphones or no access to Facebook and Twitter, will never see that post and will not vote. And those are actually the people that will determine this election, because the people in the cities are always on Facebook. They probably didn't register to vote. And those who did come the actual day won't want to go and queue to vote, or will think it's too cold to go and vote. So all those factors, the fact that someone registered to vote doesn't mean they will vote. And the fact that someone is voting on Twitter or Facebook doesn't mean they will vote on the ballot. So it's a
With the rise of fake news, how do we combat that? Luckily, there are organizations that are training the next gatekeepers who will churn out proper, verified, factual news.
At the Zimbabwe Center for Media and Information Literacy, we believe in the future of journalism, and this future is hinged on hyperlocal journalism. We're training community reporters and bloggers in digital reporting and mobile reporting, because we believe that the mainstream media or the traditional media is not doing justice in terms of service to communities. As such, we believe that these participants or these bloggers and community reporters will play a very pivotal role, especially during elections, in highlighting key issues, particularly on electoral integrity, straight from their communities.
Okay, so we are very excited to be part of this New Media Summit, and we are happy to have worked with the Plumtree Development Trust and the Zimbabwe Center for Media Literacy, the newly formed organization which brings together a number of civic initiatives, including NANGO here in the region. I think what we have seen from yesterday, which was the boot camp, where citizen journalists were being trained on election reporting and use of new media tools such as Google Analytics and the recent trends in blogging. I think it's a very positive impact on citizen journalism. What we have heard in the past has been that most citizen journalists are actually activists, and they are the ones that really contribute because they want to advance certain political opinions. But in this instance, we are saying all citizen journalists can learn the basic elements of journalism so that you reduce fake news, you increase the amount of valid and valuable information that citizens can access. And the debates today have been incredible. New media and governance, new media and fake news, new media and youth, incredible opinions from young leaders, most of whom have been participants of our exchange programs. They've had experience participating in the Mandela Washington Fellowship programs, the Community Solutions programs, Foreign Press Centers programs. They've been there and they've seen what's happening in the US and other countries. They're coming back here to share that knowledge and advance good journalism, free flow of information in Zimbabwe.
Our role really goes beyond just journalism. Certainly we see journalism as going digital and mobile. That's why we're capacitating our young people, young content creators in terms of digital journalism, because we see the future of journalism going straight to the digital space. But then, as the name suggests, we also envision to doing more work in terms of digital information literacy, because we know that in as much as journalism can go digital or mobile, as long as ordinary citizens are not digital savvy or do not have the basic literacy in terms of understanding digital media content, then will not have played a very significant role. So that's why our vision goes beyond just journalism. We also intend to actually build community media capacity in digital media content.
And because it's election season, this training is meant to try and equip the citizen journalists so that they're able to share information with the community at large. And from this training, one of the primary things that we've been trying to emphasize on is the fact that we want responsible journalists who try and curb fake news. So we are hoping that people will be more informed so that they're able to make informed decisions even as they go towards the electoral period. They have access to information and that will help them to make informed decisions.
But as you can see, in the past we've actually trained the citizen journalists because we believe that in as much as citizen journalism can be done by anyone, there is need to professionalize it to avoid unfortunate activities like disinformation, misinformation, fake news, whatever you call it. So there's need really to build capacity for community reporters. That's why sometimes we interchange the term citizen journalist and community reporter. For us, a community reporter is someone who is a citizen journalist who has been trained, whereas a citizen journalist is an ordinary citizen who is just a spontaneous reporter.
Yeah, I'm a blogger myself, and I've been blogging about gender issues and general issues to do with my community, especially service delivery. But from this workshop, I've learned about reporting on elections, something that I'm going to do when I go back to my people, to my community. I'm going to report about elections. I'm going to teach them a lot about these elections so that they get informed. I've developed an interest in reporting on governance. I'm going to report on governance and keep informing my people and following up on what these politicians are promising them in our communities, if they are delivering according to their manifestos. I have friends that follow my blog. They share my information, what I write, my stories with different people in our communities. I also share the links through Facebook, WhatsApp, and other social media platforms.
As a citizen journalist and a community reporter, I think it's important to also look into those issues that are being ignored by the mainstream media and other media.
Our vision is that these community reporters and bloggers will play a very key role in terms of documenting and reporting, especially during this election period. But our vision goes beyond the elections themselves, because we see these as active community reporters and citizen journalists who are actually supposed to be playing a role in terms of reporting issues which are actually not reported by the traditional media.
You know, I look at young people today, I look at this summit, and to me, a lot of what the young people in this room today and what young people have to do in Zimbabwe in terms of social media is to get out to the rural areas, to get out to their peer groups, to make sure that they are aware of social media and what they can get out of it in terms of real information.
For me, it is inevitable that citizens will report what is happening, true or false, but that is an activity. Actually, this has been happening in the past, even before the era of new media. But because there was no platform which enables the flow of information or quick flow of information, that might seem like it was not in existence. So for me, citizen journalism or new media has to just, anyone, any institution must just let that flow. But of course, we would encourage citizens to avoid spreading fake news. They must use new media responsibly. That is what we could say.
Is fake news on the rise in Zimbabwe? What are your thoughts? Please join us next week as we investigate the tech that's being used in this election to push back and debunk all the fake news during this election.
Yeah.